fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg, how's it going?
I'm in the house.
You're in the house, but is it cold still, or so what's going on?
Warm here, cold out there, but I just got back from the Costco, the Trader Joe's, picking up the pre-Thanksgiving goodies. Family will be coming, and I gotta get ready.
You've had a busy year with the family and stuff, wedding in Palm Springs and driving and
I can't remember all the stuff we've done this year.
Yeah,
Wedding was the biggest. Now there's another one coming up next year, so. At least that one I won't have to drain my bank account too much. We'll see.
Yeah, Palm Springs, that's quite a,
4,210 miles of driving, something like that.
Crazy. But, hey,
great country.
It's
beautiful
worth
country.
it. You had a good time. Yeah, it's great. If you get a chance to drive across the country like that, I always say, go for it.
Absolutely. I hadn't done that in forever. It's great.
Yeah, especially in spring, summer, fall, like in the good season. It's just, it's wonderful. There's so much to see, I recommend it.
Yep, I don't disagree. And California's a beautiful place, especially Pasadena, right, Georgia?
Indeed. Yes, I was going to say here in Pasadena, we're not far at all from Palm Springs. And it does chill down here in Pasadena, believe it or not, from what you've seen on the Rose Parade on January 1 every year. But we can have some very, very chilly evenings, and I mean even down to freezing.
Ooh.
So and people are always bundled up on those early Rose Parade mornings. Every once in a while it's nice.
I marched in that Rose Parade for the Iowa Hawkeye Marching Band in 1982. We got rained on and froze on, but then it warmed up.
Now, was this from your high school or college? Oh, my goodness. But that's a great honor for your band to have been invited.
Well, our team played, so we got a chance to. We're the halftime entertainment. Iowa versus Washington.
And which team was that?
Iowa Hawkeyes. University of Iowa Hawkeyes versus Wisconsin. The Washington Huskies. And Washington killed us.
Yes.
Of course.
So often Washington is in it. It seems for years it was either Washington or USC. And I remember attending... I think it was somewhere between 84 and 86. It was Illinois, the Fighting Illini, and UCLA. And so I felt I couldn't lose at that because I'm graduated from UCLA, but actually I was rooting for the Fighting Illini. And they almost won. But
almost, yes. That's a Big Ten thing, the almost win. But now we've got Washington in the Big Ten, so.
Right. I know. Isn't that interesting?
We'll talk football for a while, Big Ten, and forget the book stuff. Yeah.
The third voice we've got joining us here is Georgia Jeffries. Now, her new book, The Younger Girls, is out, and let's get into that a little bit. So, Georgia, how did you get into this? Like, what inspired you to write this particular story?
Family history. And a discovery, an early childhood discovery, I guess, was the launching moment of this novel that would appear decades later. I was 9 years old and a very curious child, and I was exploring the stacks of family photos in a large box. As I was lifting up different photos, I found at the very bottom of the box several pieces of cardboard, letter-sized cardboard, on which yellowed newspaper had been scotch-taped, and on the top of that stack of cardboard with the several different newspaper articles from, I think at least 4 or 5 different newspapers, but right on top, the Chicago American front page, and the headline was "Heiress Slain, Married Man Held." And to the right was a picture of a beautiful young woman whom I'd never seen before. And the date, by the way, I didn't note at the time, but it was March 2nd, 1933. And then I was digging a little bit more, trying to find more information. I was 9 years old. Of course, I could read what I was reading, but none of it made much sense. And my mother came in, discovered what I was doing, explained it was time to put everything away. And I asked who Aldine Younger was. And she explained that she was my dad's older sister who had died in an accident. That was how she explained it. And then she did reach a little bit deeper into the box, and she brought out a family photo of my maternal grandmother and her 5 children. And in the middle of the photograph was a tall, lovely young woman with waved hair, just dressed to beat the band, as they said, I think, in that era. She was wearing a lace collar and the pearls. And then underneath her was a picture of my father at the age of 6. So I learned later Aldine was probably around 14 at that time. And I was just kind of enraptured with my discovery, but the eyes of this young woman on the front page of the paper, obviously it's some kind of terrible thing had happened to her, captured me. And then I was told to put everything away because my father was coming home for supper. And I didn't learn much more for years, frankly, until after my mother died quite young, and my father started to very, very gradually share some information about the hardships of his childhood and the tragic loss of his older half-sister, who had been killed. And the man held responsible for her killing had been arrested, charged with manslaughter, was convicted. But the conviction was later overturned when my father was still a child by the Illinois Supreme Court on a technicality.
Yeah, those technicalities. They ruin everything.
Yeah.
Yes, they can, especially if money has exchanged hands with the justices in Springfield. So
Yeah.
That's a technicality, yeah.
yes, that's a very important technicality that helps to explain, I think, a lot of what happens in the court system.
In life.
In life, thank you very much.
Let's just go all the way here.
Yes, let's go all the way. The quest for justice, justice?
Yeah.
But one does hope to, just in witnessing and digging deep and finding the truth, which has not always been recognized or honored, we hope to find some level of redemption, or at least exposure along the way, so that the truth is seen and not forgotten.
Is that sort of kind of your direction when you write a book like this, where you have, it's based on a true story, it's, real characters, real things that happened? Is it, or are you looking for some sort of justice to come out of this story?
Yes, I think I am. And I think justice in the sense of the balance of justice, if you will. You've seen the scales. Aldine Younger was pretty much defined for me as a child, as a young woman who died very tragically before her time at the age of 20. At the same time as my father aged, with every decade he was willing to share a little bit more, really, about the import of her in his life. I think she was the most cherished member of his family. He never really knew his father after the age of 8, and his mother was very busy managing the family farm and finances, and also her young daughter's inheritance, which was held in trust for her. It was supposed to be held in trust until she reached the age of 18, her majority. But it was not held by someone who could be trusted. The executor of her inheritance had, in fact, embezzled her entire estate before she turned 18, and then she could not understand her mother. I came across all of this correspondence in the law offices that amazingly still had all of this correspondence from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. When I went back to do my investigation in the Livingston County Courthouse in Pontiac, Illinois, my aunt's killing occurred just out of the city limits of Pontiac, Illinois, and so that historical courthouse, which goes back to Lincoln and Douglas debates, had, and it has still, an amazing basement of stacks and stacks of historical papers, property records, and I found extraordinary information on both trials, both of the embezzler of her inheritance, and by the way, he was convicted as well. He was also convicted. His conviction was also overturned by the Illinois Supreme Court. Another technicality. And the father of Asher Bentley, who was the man convicted of my aunt's killing, had been a 3-time mayor of Pontiac, and they were very wealthy landowners in the area. But in fact, my aunt's grandfather had also been a very wealthy landowner before he died, and my aunt's father had died very young. So she, I guess when my aunt was only about 11 months old, I believe, so she inherited that estate. So for much of my investigation, really, as it were, was follow the money, because my father had been told by his mother that there was a connection between the embezzlement and his sister's killing. And my father's mother also felt strongly that a member of her own family had been involved in some way. So that's part of the mystery that I inherited as my father shared more and more of the family history. And in 1996, my father was in ill health, not at all in good health, and I learned about a family reunion on his maternal side of the family that was taking place in Pontiac area in that summer. And I persuaded, after much discussion, I persuaded my father to come back with me. And in that 2 weeks we were there, that was really the beginning of the book. And I was doing a lot of oral history. I was walking through a lot of the historical locations, including where my aunt had been killed. My father was really my guide through all of this. I think it was, it was ultimately healing for him. He died just a couple months after we returned to California. But the book itself, in terms of putting pen to page, it did not happen until probably at least 15 years after that visit, 12 to 15 years. And it was very, very intermittent, and because I had I had 2 day jobs. I was, and I still am, a professor at the USC School of Cinematic Arts in the writing division. And as you know from the bio, I've also been a screenwriter for a number of years, a long career in television. So I was busy with my other work, and in fact, I finished an earlier novel for a Los Angeles imprint, Adaptive Books. It had been inspired by an HBO script of mine that I had written. And then suddenly that book actually was supposed to be produced and actually published in 2021. And we all know what happened, what was going on in 2021. And that book imprint dissolved, taken over by another company, et cetera, et cetera. Had to spend some time getting the rights back to the book. And that really was the opening for me to say, I need to go back to this family story that is so essential. It's really about, the book became a kind of legacy for me to complete, just to honor my family, and also because it's quite a story. I mean, the more I dug into all of these transcripts and records and oral histories, I mean, it was just a tangled web of, as the publisher put the subtitle on the book, a labyrinth of family betrayal. So I was constantly surprised by certain revelations and the path I needed to follow to get to the truth.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing too. Like when you go through all of the old papers and documents of something that's happened, 100 years ago, or how there's a lot of similarities in the same issues in the community, just different people. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of issues and stuff. And also, there's also, whenever I do true stories or I'm involved in a real crime, I always get a ton of information about different conspiracies or stories or gossip. Yes. But the thing is, with all of that, you've gotta still read it through and try to understand it and try to decide what's real and what's not. Like it's part of it.
That absolutely is part of that act of discernment. I was explaining when I was in conversation at a bookstore reading the other night that the creation, when you're dealing with this much historical documentation and oral history, the real choice is is the discernment in terms of what do you put into the book, and also what do you leave out. And of course, as authors, it's always about the shaping of the narrative. And for me, it was the daughter-father quest, and I had so much material about that. And then the historical documentation that informed that quest, what is real, what is not real, proven to be true. But then at the same time, in the long evolution of the story, I came to understand, of course, that Aldine was the centerpiece of it, because it was her voice that had been silenced. And it was her voice, it was she who left such an impression and a mark on my father, and emotionally and spiritually, I would say as well, in terms of the later years of his life, the grief that became a grievance. And I would say that really, affected the next generation, which is my generation. So many families, have these family secrets and these tragedies that aren't talked about, that later generations or perhaps know nothing about. And I think it's always important to try to expose what occurred, because I think subliminally or in very conscious ways, it affects the entire family for generations.
Well, why is this called historical fiction? Are you bouncing around in time? So you're going back and doing present? How is this thing structured?
Yes. I mean, it opens, it opens. We were talking about the Inland Empire earlier. It opens with a small chapter set in the Inland Empire in California, Coachella Valley in 1975, a very short chapter which introduces Joanna as a teenage girl and the relationship with her family and this dysfunctional family, and how she is kind of the center of this as an only child trying to save her family in certain ways. And then we go to also third person POV, 1996, and alternating between her and her father and how they happened to go back to Illinois. And then we intercut at a certain point, and this is all, of course, very much connected structurally in terms of the characterization and the themes, to Aldine Younger's diary. Aldine Younger's found diary that she kept from the age of 12 to the age of 20. Her last entry was just a month or so before she was killed. Now, did I find that actual diary? No. I created that diary based on the family stories, the oral histories of some of her peers, even ladies who had gone to grade school with Aldine, associates of lawyers who had worked, descendants of those lawyers who had worked with their grandmother's case. And of course, I include actual quotes from the transcripts and from the local newspapers and from the Chicago paper. There's a snippet of an interview with Asher Bentley's wife, who, quote, was standing by her man as the trials were ongoing in Pontiac, and he was on trial for manslaughter. So no, there's there's this historical documentation in this.
Yeah, when you go through this, and there's a lot of personal connection to you with family and stuff like that, and from the very beginning of this journey of writing this story to where the book is out now, has this changed the way you feel about your family members or family or people that are part of this story? Have you, I guess, become closer to some of them or distant to some? Like, how has this changed the structure of your family?
Well, my extended family is still in Illinois, so the family that my husband and I have created with our children, that's all centered here in Southern California, and it has been for years. However, I was born and raised in the heartland until I was 12 years old, so obviously I carry a lot of that history with me, and I actually refer to the younger girl as Midwestern noir. It's because it is, and it's also a cautionary tale. It's we talk about the time, how we use the eras, and this came up in conversation the other night at the bookstore as well. The 1920s were very much about the emancipation of women in American society, and Aldine Younger came of age during that period. And in fact, when I was able to find the yearbook, her high school yearbook in the Pontiac library, there she was. She was a star on the swim team, right? So, Gertrude Ederle was probably a role model of hers. And would women have been on a swim team, 10 years, 20 years before that? I doubt it. So she, and all the influence and the media, the flappers and so on. So I incorporate that in terms of her first person entries in the diary, the movies she goes to, the actresses she admires. Those diary entries, again, are influenced by some of the oral history. One of the elderly ladies that I had interviewed is such a remarkable recall, and she described one of the dresses that Aldine Younger wore in 7th grade because she was so impressed with Aldine's sense of style. So I translated that into part of a diary entry in terms of Aldine going shopping. She had some disposable income based on the interest of her inheritance. Now, this is something that was very specific to her life, not to her siblings, because her mother, my paternal grandmother, had actually lost her husband. She'd been widowed twice, so Aldine's father was not my father's father. It's quite a complex family.
Yeah, I'm trying to sketch it out here.
And there's a family tree, in the back of the book. And Aldine Younger's line is it's absolutely documented because part of her line, ended with her death. But the surname, for instance, Younger, yes, that part of the family, at least according to family lore, did have a connection to the Younger outlaws of the 19th century, but it wasn't discussed because that branch of the family had also traced their roots way back to the American Revolution. So one of my aunt's aunts was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. So again, what an American family, right? I mean, heroes and outlaws, and so that was also part of my research to document all of that. Oh, you just asked if it changed my relationship with the family. I will say very, very briefly with the extended family, some cousins who had been very helpful initially when I told them I was investigating the death of my aunt and was trying to get to the greater truth and so on. They were very valuable in giving me some more family history, which I incorporate in there. However, once they understood that I was also seeking more information about the embezzler of her estate, who'd been a close business colleague of my great uncle. The door was shut. I had to ask for access to certain family property records of my aunt's inheritance, and I was told point blank that they were in a safe place and it would not serve the interests of the family for me to have access to that. So it changed that relationship.
Hey, Georgia, when someone gets done reading this book, because there's a lot in here, There's
Yes,
multiple
there is.
periods.
Yes, there is.
And there's murder. That's right. And there's family dynamics, and there's probably geographical dynamics, maybe urban versus rural. When someone gets done with this, what do you want the reader? They close the book and they go, "This book said to me, this was the reason to read this book." What do you want them to say?
I don't know what they're going to say, but my hope, is that they will be moved, compelled enough to explore more of their own family history. And I don't mean that just literally or intellectually. I mean very much on an emotional, and I will also say on a spiritual basis, because I think we're all formed by this, whether we consciously discuss it or not. And as you know, one of the elements of this book is magical realism. There are certain scenes that actually take on a spiritual aspect to them. That's primarily because I see the story on many levels, and also because Joanna, the protagonist, as she walks into the story, needs to, of course, as we know with all of our work, needs to go through an arc of change and transformation. And at the beginning of this story, she's a successful young woman. She's also very concrete in her worldview. She sees what's directly in front of her, and she has a certain attitude and approach about what her responsibility is to the family. But I would say this is a learning journey for her. There's much more in this world, Horatio, than what is seen, to paraphrase a quote from Hamlet. And so I think it changes her, also in terms of the family she has created, with her husband and her own children. You have to move in some level from the past to the present. Lost my earbuds here. It doesn't mean that you reject the past. I mean, as we all know, Faulkner quote, the past is never dead. It's not even past. I think it's made her a wiser, more empathic, more compassionate person because of what she's learned and understood. And I think that's all to the good in her life journey.
So what's different in your process when you write a true story like this with your characters as compared to something like, screenplays and screenwriting with shows like China Beach or Cagney and Lacey and stuff? So when you get into these characters, is it a different process for you? Well,
that's a really interesting question. Of course, China Beach was based on history as well. And maybe it's no accident I was a history major in college, right? That I am attracted to true stories, how we've been formed by our social and our cultural history as well as our personal history. And the characters in China Beach were created in a pilot, of course, as in all television development, a season and a half before I joined the show. And so those were existing characters. So the stories that I developed had to be in concert with the characters that had already been created and set in motion. That said, the journey of any television show and the requirement of the writers and producers who are on staff is to continually develop the character. So in one of the episodes I had written for China Beach, I brought in a journalist, a female journalist who really was, I guess, challenging McMurphy in terms of trying to get more information about what was going on base and so on. So, and that prodding really helped to further develop McMurphy's point of view. And so that's our job always when we're involved on the staff of any television film. Of course, if I'm writing separate features or movie of the week, it all depends on whether that's based on a true character or on adaptation, because I've also done several adaptations of books. So I take it from there, and how much further can I take it? And I will say, I guess, the commonality of all of my television work that you're probably aware of, but also on it for a number of pilots that I also developed, was a sense of involving social issues. or reflecting what our society was going through or had gone through at a certain period of time, and what have we gleaned from that? How have we healed from that? How does that determine the choices that we make? We're not islands, we're always in relationship to society around us. Whatever those dramatic developments are in Canada or America. So we're always in relationship to that. And how do we move forward in our own roles to deal with that?
Well, thank God we don't have any of those social issues anymore.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Especially in America. Right.
Literature is taking care of them all.
Yeah. Things are all good now and peaceful.
And we have so many opportunities here. We have so many opportunities to...
Yeah. Dickens said that too, kind of like the first line of a book.
Yes. We do our best to stay optimistic moving forward. Yes. Mm.
That's right. Labor through.
Labor through. Well said.
Labor through. Keep going stuff.
Well said.
Well, so at the end of the day now, you've done the book. It's out. And you look back at it. Do you think it's changed you?
Oh, yes. I think the writing of the book, the long process of writing and coming to terms with relationships, my relationship with my father, the impact on the family, knowing so much more about his childhood and what formed him. I have just such an appreciation for that. And I think it's deepened me as a person. I also think it's really contributed to my continuing development as a writer. Yeah, I do, and I'm very grateful for it. It really was a labor of love over the years, and there was great value in it, and not just for me, but for certain family members. I have heard from certain close family members and even my own children that it was quite a revelation for them to learn through some of the scenes in the book. As a writer, I for decades I have written cinematically. I think in terms of scenes. So many books are written perhaps with a lot of interior dialogue, But I've always thought in scenes, and I learned very early on as a young screenwriter, particularly in my first series, Cagney and Lacey, which was really my film school shortly after college, that so much can be revealed in dialogue and in the tension of between individuals in any scenario. As I learned not to use exposition in writing screenplays, that was also really, I think, very helpful to me when I was writing my first novel. And this is actually, I was writing my first novel, and this was kind of simultaneously off on. And then another novel, which I actually begun at the Bath Center for the Arts years ago and then put aside. That will probably be my next book, and that's also based on a true crime that occurred in Los Angeles in the 80s. I think in scenes, and we live life in scenes, do we not? And whenever we're engaging with anybody, but don't explain it. That's one of the great lessons that I learned. Don't explain it. Give a little insights with some of that self, perhaps a touch of self-dialogue. Our minds are always going, even, when we're talking to other people, or especially the aftermath of that. But show it. And then, and even with Aldine's diary, which came totally from my imagination, but it was also informed by some of this oral history from other people's points of view. That further always reveals characterization. Of course, characterization is, that is the most important element of good writing to me. Show the multi-layers of character. And this is a central point in my MFA thesis classes at USC Cinema.
Let's talk about social media, website, contact. Do you interact with readers? Are you involved in that way?
Well, that's a learning curve for me right now, which I am involved in. Yes, with the assistance of one of my publishing staff, we do have Facebook, Instagram accounts, and LinkedIn as well. I have a number of colleagues on LinkedIn. And the whole element of marketing is its own learning curve, as you know. The depth and the comfort of being deep in our stories. It's such a private, intimate world. And then the book comes out, and the light goes on, and we're in relationship with everyone who is reading the book, coming to readings, going on social media, reading essays on the website, and I do have a number of essays as well as a newsletter. So I invite your listeners to visit georgiajeffries.com, and I do have a quarterly newsletter. I don't believe in being inundated with too many emails. We all are deluged by too many emails, but I think a quarterly is a nice, balanced way of approaching it. And so the first newsletter went out on October 22nd, which was the launch of the book, and it included pictures of my trip back in Chicago in September. And I also I want to give a little plug for a bookstore called Women and Children First in the Andersonville area of Chicago, which had been recommended to me, and I met with the co-owner there, Lynn Moody, who was, and I thank her for her support of my book, and so they have it in the shop. And so I discovered parts of Chicago that I hadn't seen since, I mean, when I was a child. I mean, huge changes, of course. I'd been back there a couple times in the last few years, but it was mainly to do things like visit the Art Institute, right? On the way to visiting other family and friends in the central part of Illinois. But it is a wonderful opportunity to meet with readers and to talk with them and hear how the book has touched them or affected them. Yeah, that's a gift, isn't it? You've had that with your books as well, I'm sure. Often.
Oh, one or two readers. Yeah.
Many.
Yeah. Well, now we're going to put your website and book and everything. The book is up there now. We'll have that all on our website so people can find it easily and find you.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you being here. And the book, The Younger Girl, our guest, Georgia Jeffries. So thank you.
Many thanks, Alan and Joe. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.